I'd like to start by asking Elizabeth Warren to respond to Judge Sporkin via Judge Stiglitz, and the question being, in essence, what would get the job done in consumer financial protection, in your mind? What's the model?
Good. So thank you for asking, because I almost jumped out of my chair in this discussion. Do we need good people? Yeah, of course we need good people. But this isn't just about people. It's about structures. We have set up financial regulation in the case of consumer products, for example, by saying there will be multiple regulatory agencies. And if you don't like this regulator, you can go over to that regulator. And who pays the fees of the regulators? The financial institutions who have a choice to move elsewhere. Right now, financial products like mortgages, how are they regulated? Depends on the charter of the institution that issues them. So we're going to have different sets of rules on different financial products based on whether you're going to be a federally chartered bank, a federally chartered thrift, a state chartered bank, state chartered thrift, a state chartered industrial organization, or a non-depository lender who is outside most of the scope of this. I didn't get my best slide up here. I hope you'll open the book and look at how just the federal portion of this regulation works. The consequence of that is worse than no regulation at all. It has truly created, it's just an open, just go, take what you want. What the Consumer Product Safety Commission is about is to say, look, we're going to change all this around, we're going to regulate by product so that we stop this business of doing all of the end runs around the game. If it's a mortgage, same set of regulations regardless of who issues it. If it's a car loan, same set of regulations regardless of who issues it. And that becomes a key part. There's no place to run, no place to hide. The consumer products get a level treatment. But the part I really want to say is we can't take the position that because regulation has failed us now, the conclusion to draw from that is regulation never works. Government never works. Let's just all quit and go home at this point. I want to ask if anybody in this audience has ever taken a white pill issued by a pharmacy. Have you ever stopped to wonder, well, could be an antibiotic, then again could be baking soda, because baking soda would have boosted short-term profits for this pharmaceutical company that issued them? The answer is no. Does the Food and Drug Administration work perfectly? No. Anyone want to go back to the 1920s where a pharmaceutical company was anybody with a bathtub and 6 boxes of chemicals and whatever promise they wanted to make? Anybody want to go back to when we didn't have an environmental protection agency? Is it perfect? No. But I do turn on the water and drink out of the tap. Well, I use a cup. We can keep doing this. Consumer Product Safety Commission, God bless those people. They've been smothered, they've been strangled, they've taken away budget from these folks. But the reality is, in the 1970s, infant car seats collapsed on impact. They squished little tiny babies. There are people who are alive today because the Consumer Product Safety Commission kept them safe as babies. There are people today who have 2 eyes instead of 1 because it kept little boys from shooting out the other one with BB guns. Regulation has done good things for Americans. It's done good things in physical products, in the things we touch, in the things we taste, in the things we feel. Where it has failed is in financial instruments, in the financial world. And so what we're really saying here, what I feel that we've got to be talking about here, is not that it's impossible. We can point out what's wrong with it. It's that we have lots of models that regulation can work, and that the fundamental principles are sound. The fundamental principles work. We just got to move them to the right place. Yeah, this part of the system is broken, but it's not never fixable. It does not take the perfect person to run one. We can build structures that work. We just need to get about the business of doing it. Other than that, I don't feel strongly.
Can I just add one comment on that? And Simon and I both worked internationally. You know, I was chief economist at the World Bank, and he was at the IMF. If we had seen a governing structure that corresponds to our Federal Reserve System, we would have been yelling and screaming and said that country does not deserve any assistance. This is a corrupt governing structure, and time for us to reflect on our own structure today and to say, look, there are parts of this can be improved.
Well, I'm sorry to inform the audience that Elizabeth Warren won't be getting an endorsement from Poland Springs or Fiji water anytime soon. But other than that, I think we should turn to questions from the audience. And please indicate your question and indicate who you'd like to address it.
My question is for anyone on the panel. One of the things that has stayed with me throughout this whole crisis is the persistency of bad ideas and why they don't go away. There was just, I'm not a fan of polls, there was just a poll that said, should we have more regulation or less regulation from Rasmussen, and it was something, 54% of the polled population wanted less regulation, and the remainder wanted more regulation. The efficient market hypothesis is a classic example. How do these bad ideas hang around, not just years, but decades after there's significant evidence that they're just wrong? And that's for anyone who could possibly shed some light on that.
George Soros, you've talked a lot about the manipulative function of information.
I believe that basically when you are trying to figure out things where you are yourself a participant, it's impossible to gain knowledge, because what you think is part of what you have to think about. So you are both a participant who's trying to shape things and an observer who's trying to understand it. And what you're trying to understand is not something given that gives you an independent criterion by which you can judge that whether you are right or wrong, because your thinking, your views are part of the reality that you try to understand. So this is what the difference between natural science and social affairs. And it's inherent in social affairs that the participants have to make their decisions not based on knowledge, but on their prejudices and biases and decision rules that they have developed. And this is the world we live in. Markets are imperfect, regulators are even more imperfect. And we need to recognize that, take into account the imperfections of regulators. And nevertheless, we have to accept that markets need to be regulated because they are not perfect. They don't tend towards equilibrium. It is inherent in markets that they create bubbles. So you have to accept responsibility for keeping bubbles from getting too big and create the kind of destruction that we have just lived through. And the regulators have to know that they will never get it right. But nevertheless, they get a feedback from the markets, and that will tell them whether they've done too much or too little. And so they can adjust it. So it's a cat and mouse game between regulators and markets.